Talk about financing literature, and initially we planned to meet twice on Friday with guests representing financing institutions, and on Saturday with people who apply for financing for their literary projects. But finally there's only one discussion today. We'll be talking all together. That is even better because we will be able to confront and we will be able to see different points of view. I will introduce the guest first, then I will ask them to talk briefly about their institutions and projects. And in the second part of meeting, we will move to discussion. I hope to discuss some specific problems, some substantive questions about financing literature. Mai Pflüger, who sits just here, is head of the Culture and Education section at the Robert Bosch Foundation. She works in the Department of International Relations, Europe and its neighbors. Ryana van Winkle'a is a poet, life artist, podcaster and critic, and as a member of Highlight Arts, he has organized festivals and translation workshops in Syria, Pakistan and Iraq. Biagio Guerry is a poet, performer also, responsible for the program of Sabir Fest, which takes place in 4 weeks in Sicily. And Krzysztof Żwirski is representing UNESCO, Krakow UNESCO City of Literature project, and he's responsible for coordinating work with the bookstores. Also, he's the coordinator of Second Life of the book cycle, right? Okay, first we do short presentations, we talk briefly about each project. Maya, could you go first, please?
It would be nice to see a bit of the audience. You are sitting in the dark. Maybe it's technically possible. I start to introduce the Robert Bosch Foundation to you. And first, Dzień dobry, hello. The Robert Bosch Foundation is one of the major German non-profit organizations associated with a private company who has managed a philanthropic bequest of our company founder Robert Bosch for over 50 years now. The relations between Poland and Germany are important for us since over 40 years. Robert Bosch made good business deals with as an automotive supplier with fridges and drills. You may know the name Bosch, and wanted to give something back to the society. And so he established the foundation. We are an NGO and consider ourselves as a civic actor. When I joined the foundation, the so-called Polish library, edited by Karl Dedecius, a translator of Polish poetry, was just finished, the most elaborated literary project in terms of time and costs we ever had. The complete series of 50 books was presented at Frankfurt Book Fair, where Poland was the guest of honor in this year 2000. Our funding of literature took a turn since then. The Polish library was important as a complement to the culture of our neighbors to create access to historically important novels via excellent readable translations. But you may also take a critical look at it. It was not the way to attract a broad audience, to stimulate a wider public debate, or to enhance contacts between the contemporary literary worlds in the neighboring countries, aims we now pursue. The Robert Bosch Foundation is not funding literature as art for art's sake. Literature is for us just an important part of international cultural exchange. I know that's a special point of view on literature. Our vision is to live in open societies which interact with other countries and cultures, where culture plays a key role for their identities and cultural diversity is appreciated as an enrichment. On the way to this vision, we pursue three approaches. The first approach is building awareness. Literature somehow simulates realities, creates worlds as it could be, as it could have been, or maybe somewhere else, and invites people to visit unknown environments and change their angle. The reader does not travel, but he gets mentally mobile. The second approach is facilitating dialogue. We build platforms for public debates where international writers with other academics, journalists, and civically engaged citizens discuss burning questions of societal importance. It is not enough to stay within their own field. There is too much interconnection, and you have to make more efforts to integrate different points of view. To tackle the current challenges, a cross-border, a cross-sectoral, interdisciplinary strategy is needed. Our third approach is creating together. Writers and cultural institutions are often open to international partnerships, but there is a lack of contacts and there are language barriers, and additional effort organizationally and financially is required. We want to open up the cultural landscape to actors from other countries by working together. During the collaboration process, stable international contacts and networks are created. These three approaches, building awareness, facilitating dialogue, and creating together, are closely interlinked. You can always start with building awareness, but creating together will not work without awareness and dialogue. It depends also on the circumstances with which approach is more promising or less risky. The Robert Bosch Foundation does not invest in stones, but in people. We try to identify change makers in the cultural field. The key focus is on the creative artists and the cultural mediators. The wider focus is on institutional stakeholders and other private and public actors like municipalities and commercial players as publishing houses, media and entrepreneurs. We want them to realize the quality and impact of the cultural producers. Now I would like to give you 3 examples of our projects. The first example is the Crossing Border program. It provides international research grants to authors who prepare a book where other countries and cultures play a role. We welcome both newcomers and established authors. At present there are 250 authors in the program. Herta Müller as a Nobel Prize winner, also as debutants, children books as well as novels. The writers travel to other countries in order to conduct first-hand research, visit authentic places, get a breath of their atmosphere, speak to witnesses of historical events, look for protagonists, make personal experiences and have unplanned encounters. The key issue of the Crossing Border program is that we finance unwritten books, ideas in the earliest stage of formation. we invest in a workshop phase of a book. That means to take a risk. That means that the writer is free to develop his idea, how it arises out of the research and working process. Crossing border program means midwifery, to help the idea to be born and giving an advance of trust. That is building awareness in two directions. On the one hand, the author makes the first-hand experience. On the other hand, the readers make the second-hand experiences. We also finance events for the crossing border authors in the country where the book is published, but also in the countries of research. And we provide money for supporting translations in the destination country. My second example is Europe 21, Thinking Tomorrow's Society, a program of our foundation and the Leipzig Book Fair. It has been set up for 3 years. Writers, academics, journalists, and civically engaged citizens from different countries are invited for a dialogue on the future of Europe. The first edition was about refuge and immigration. The second edition was about solidarity. And the third edition is about what is European. Does it mean to be more civilized, history conscious, and wealthy? Each time we had another young curator who designs the program. And the book fair is a really good place to build platforms and initiate debates. My third example is the International Drama Lab. It gives renowned playwrights a space to write, reflect, and develop ideas. This year we invited dramatists from Turkey, Israel, Ukraine, and Germany to work on topics that relate to war and peace. They started with a writing lab in Berlin. Then there are exchange forums with civil society activists in Turkey, Israel, and Ukraine. The resulting works will be presented at festivals, theater festivals in several countries. The International Drama Lab is an example for fruitful collaborating and working individually at the same time. So thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present some of our literary projects.
Okay, Ryan, tell us about Highlight Art Festival.
Sure, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for having me here. I'm Ryan, and mostly I'm a poet, but I make one-to-one poetry, theater experiments, and a bit of some cabaret kind of things, and I also am the literary coordinator for Highlight Arts. Highlight Arts is a pretty wide-ranging organization, and we work in a lot of mediums. So we have film, visual arts, music programs, but I'll try to concentrate on literature since probably that's what most of you are interested in, but feel free to ask me about anything else that we do. I think it's all pretty interchangeable. Am I speaking too fast, by the way? Is that okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Yeah, all right. Right on, thumbs up. Okay, so Highlight Arts, for people who don't know, I'm just going to read the thing from our website. We organize festivals, curate new collaborations, and generate new work across a range of art forms. We work primarily in regions which have experienced conflict, which we define as inequality, prejudice, war, or environmental disaster. We've focused since 2007 primarily on the places that have experienced war. So that would be Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Pakistan, and we've also been working in the Arctic recently. So mostly places where when I tell my mom I'm going there, she gets real worried. So, and what we're trying to do is open up dialogues between people. So we try to work in collaboration. So I guess the best thing I can talk about is sort of what I do as literature developer, or coordinator. So I bring 4 or 5 British writers to, say, Iraq, and I put them in a room with 4 or 5 Iraqi writers, and they begin to work and translate each other's work. Anybody who's been involved in the translation process, maybe some people have worked with Literature Across Frontiers, which is how I started getting involved with this, and I'm grateful to them, knows it's a very intimate act. You know, you get this very special relationship with the person you're translating, because you get to ask another poet, what are you talking about? Which is not something we get to do very often as audiences or readers. So, and then the poet will break it down and they'll explain that the butterfly symbolizes their grandmother, which in the spring is a thing. So you can understand where they're getting things from, or they'll explain that carrots are an aphrodisiac, and then you have to translate that and into something that works in English. And those relationships between the poets are really special. And also what we learn through that is that we're all kind of the same, you know? Yeah, people in Iraq have experienced a lot more maybe hardships than people in the UK in different ways. But as one of the poets we worked with said, whenever she would present the work to our British audiences, she'd say, you know, everybody's had a shitty boyfriend. And that's true, or shitty girlfriend. Everybody loves their parents. Everybody wants a better life for their kids, and that's usually in the poetry. So what we're trying to do is get these people together to establish a relationship with each other, and then we're trying to take that to audiences in the UK where there might be prejudice or preconceived notions about places that have experienced conflict and the cultures that that are different than ours, and we try to show that to an audience. In the UK and across the world. So really, it's about demystifying the other, and we try not to be too hard about the politics or the righteousness or the like, hey, war is bad. We all know that. So we try to just explore and showcase these relationships, and that's and we're lucky, you know. I think we're lucky as artists to be able to do that. We get to sit in rooms like this with each other and kind of share our cultures and our ideas and understand our common humanity, especially at a time when people are seeking to divide people and separate us. So what we're trying to do is just give a vision of a world where actually we're all together. We make poetry films. We've made poetry films. We made these two books, one of Pakistani and one of Iraqi literature. We've got one online in a PDF form that's Syrian. And yeah, we're just really trying to get to get people to empathize and find commonalities behind the headlines. So it's not all. We always worry that we're going to be drifting into war pornography. We're not really interested in that. We're really interested in the human connections, and through that, I think that's a political act. Just putting people in a room together and making things. Most recently, I've been in Pakistan working on advocacy work in terms of fighting against the death penalty there, making plays and theater and doing work with poets there, which I'd be happy to talk more about. And I don't know if I have anything else to say unless there's other questions.
In your questionnaire before the festival, you said your real aim is to maintain peace in the world. So this is the most important idea you're trying to. I think
yeah. There was a moment if I can tell a story by way of an example. When we worked in Syria, Damascus, we were going to have a festival in Damascus. In 2011, spring of 2011, and then obviously the war started there, and we couldn't, so we had to move the entire festival to Beirut, which was an interesting challenge and a very, very stressful time to do that. And during that process, we met this man called Lukman Durki, who ran a thing called Beta Kosi, an underground open mic night, basically. The same you find anywhere in the world, right? You guys have all been to these open mic nights. Somebody reads a poem, somebody plays guitar. It's lovely, but it was really special and really rare in Damascus at that time. The regime kind of allowed it to happen. And of course the war started, and 2 years later, I was in Iraqi Kurdistan in Erbil, and it so happened that he had been relocated. He was a refugee now from Syria, living in Iraqi Kurdistan. And he invited myself and my partner over for dinner and cooked a lovely meal with his wife and his kids. And then people started to drift in, other refugees, people who had just lost their homes or had been kicked out of the country. And there were some NGO workers, and just this, suddenly all of these people showed up, and there was all of a sudden a bottle of vodka and a bottle of whiskey appeared, and somebody started playing an oud, and everybody was singing, and I was banging really poorly on a bottle with a lighter, trying to keep time. And at that point I thought, geez, if everybody could just be in this room, that would be a vision of world peace, I thought. And that's, I think, what we're ultimately striving for, is to put audiences emotionally in that place where they go, okay, I get this. This is, we all enjoy those moments. They're all real special. So I hope that's not too sappy for this audience. We can talk about the dirty money stuff in a minute.
All right, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Let's move to Sabir first then.
Good morning. Thank you to be here, and thank you to who invite me here. Sabir Fest is a festival, but it's a mixed things. But we can start from the beginning. The beginning is an house of edition in Messina, who is called Mesogea, which is the old Latin word for the Mediterranean Sea, and who is devoted to everything which is related with the Mediterranean, so from poetry to novels, anthropology, history, and what else. This group of Mesogea start thinking about a festival on this thematic, and after different attempt, then we start to do it 4 years ago in Messina. Then, little by little, the festival is growing. So this year we have, at the same time, the 4th edition in Messina, the second one in Catania, which is the town where I live, and the first one in Reggio Calabria, which is on the other side of the street of Messina. No? Sabir, why this name? Sabir is a lingua franca, once spoken throughout the ports and vessels in the Mediterranean Sea. It is not now an alive language, but there is this utopia and this concrete utopia about trying to meet people from the other coasts, to have something in common, to translate each other. And so Sabir is the starting point of everything. It's not only a literary festival, because the subtitle is Culture and Citizenship in the Mediterranean. So we have, three main lines. One is a book fair, which is very important also to let the festival exist. The other one is a festival, mainly literary festival, but also open to visual arts or music or performance. And the third part is related with the activism, a dialogue between people from the different parts of the Mediterranean that this year will produce this Manifesto for Mediterranean Citizenship, which is something that we have been working in a forum for 3 years with people involved from Maghreb, Middle East, Grecia, France, and different parts of the sea, of the people of the Mediterranean area. And we will present this document and discuss it with people on the web or in meetings. So it's just the first step to arrive at a more complete document. So there is always this political and social bottom, very important for us, and an active and practical part, which is always related to a theory and reflection, a theoretical reflection on the Mediterranean Sea and the people who live there, you know. Because yes, we are Europe, but on the same time, Sicily, where I live, is just in the middle of the sea and is in a border place. We are one of the first point where these immigrants arrive in Europe, and it's everywhere in the street, you know, and it's everywhere in our life. If one thinks that, I know, for example, it's terrible to say, but we eat a lot of fish, but it makes us think that the fact that there are 1,000 people dying in that sea that are probably food for the fish that we eat. It's something very awful to say, but it's a fact, and we have to relate with us. In one way, we have many political problems in Sicily, I think, but on the other hand, I think that our best face, better face, is the face in which we are open to the other, probably because we had this habit of being conquisted or being in relation with other people, and we are very, I think every part in the world is a story of being mixed, but often people don't recognize this. In Sicily, we know this. You know, it's not a problem for us to be mixed. I think it's something very clear in our culture. Then, of course, to have so many people arriving is not so easy to manage but we are working on that. So, going back to the festival, as I told you, there is the festival, there is this forum, it's called Sabir Maidan, and there is appunto the book fair. Just one little thing to say more is that every year we have a team, and the theme of this year is this courtesy to the guests. So this, between, it's called in English, parenthesis. So the idea of the way that we can be open, and also the way that we are not so open often. So the young artists who create the picture that you can see in our site, www.sabirfest.it, it just gives this idea. No? There are chairs, and some chairs are very comfortable, and some other chairs are very uncomfortable, and that's where we are now. I think it's okay for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Biagio. It's nice you came here. Your festival is in 4 weeks, so you've got plenty of work, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm working here, but on the same time, as I told you, we are. I'm not the director. We are a group. So this is what make us go on. No, a lot of voluntary work and a lot of people involved with passion in that.
Okay, thank you. Krzysztof, tell us please about the UNESCO City of Literature program. How does it work?
Okay, to start from the beginning, it was 2009 when the festival life in Krakow was in high bloom. There were different festivals and still very successful projects going on, applying for many different audiences. And also there was this big spectacular success of tourism in Krakow, that so many people started to come in the city. There was the time when we started to think about the real need to do something that will be more deeply rooted in the city, in its inhabitants, to do something which will be not only some kind of event which goes on 4 days or 5 days, and then everything is over. And on the other hand, to start to focus on something will be more permanent, more consequent, to work with people. And that's how the idea of UNESCO cities, creative cities, arrived to us. This is a program established by UNESCO in 2004. We know all the UNESCO heritage list, right? So Krakow is on this list from the very beginning. But we think about the heritage not only thinking about the monuments, about the things that doesn't live, actually. We think about the heritage also as some kind of environment where many different people meet from different branches, create something very interesting. And this was this program established by UNESCO in 7 categories. There are cities of music, of UNESCO, there are cities of film, there are cities of design, even gastronomy, and there are cities of literature. Krakow have chosen literature not by chance. It was also always a big focus here in the city about the publishing life, the editors who work here, the writers, the rich literary heritage. Not only these two Nobel Prize winners who live in the same time, Sława Szymborska and Czesław Miłosz, but such figures as Stanisław Lem, such international figure, the masters of theater like Tadeusz Kantor or Sławomir Mrożek. So there are many different layers to explore and ways to talk about Krakow as a city of literature. Also, other interesting thing is that talking about or thinking literature in the eyes of the city means highly different perspective, different from the national point of view, where there is only one point of view actually, when there are only writers who who deal with the one single language matters. Actually, when you think about the city and its environment, you can see many different layers. You can see, for example, that the first parts of Johann Wolfgang Goethe's Faust was written in Krakow. That first text in Hungarian and in Yiddish was written in Krakow. So you have this multicultural point of view that is so important right now to underline in these times of rising nationalism, rising sectarian thinking. So this was the beginning, and also, of course, after the time when Krakow gained this title of UNESCO City of Literature, it was the 7th city in the world after Edinburgh and other cities, but first Slavic actually speaking city, and first in this part of the world, this Central European environment. When it was gained, of course, it means at first the prestige. It's not about the money. UNESCO doesn't assign any supply, any support, financial support that is connected with this title. But it's rather some kind of obligation and responsibility for the city who have this title to explore more, to find its identity in the literature. And Krakow did well, actually. We can see that after 4 years, we have many different instruments of support literary life. It's not only the festivals. Of course, we have upcoming Joseph Conrad Festival that will happen in October. A lot of international guests, as well as brilliant Polish writers. There are book fair in Krakow, the biggest in Poland, that is happening at the same time. So coincidentally, like around 100,000 people come to city only to attend literary events, and it's a very particular time, the end of the October in Krakow. But it's also the whole other time of the year, the different festivals that are organized by the passionates, by the foundations who ask for our support, who have very interesting ideas, but before the title could not operate seriously. Like, for example, we had the little non-fiction festival, we have Children's Writers Festival, Children's Literature Festival, we have Poetic Miłosz Festival, of course. This is municipal, but our goal is to strengthen those ideas who come from the very bottom, and they are very valuable. And before the title, it was no tool to support them. So to give you 3 examples, I deal personally with programs created for bookstores in Krakow. We see in Poland, as in other countries of Europe and worldwide, the crisis of traditional bookstore formats, that people tend to buy books online. They don't have time to visit bookstores. And the same thing happened in Krakow, of course. we have this fear of missing the last bookstore on the main square. Actually, it didn't happen so far, but it's very, very close. So, as the center of the city changed rapidly in the recent time and became some kind of paradise park for tourists, that there are no citizens coming nearby. We have the idea to support these last Mohicans, the last booksellers in Krakow, and there are three ways in which we support them. 2 years ago, there was created a program to support cultural activities in the bookstores. So the city saved 200,000 zloty each year for the programs created by foundations who animate life in bookstores. So there are different bookstores that can apply for this program. Just share their ideas and we promote them. So this is our role. This is also a system of discount prices for the fees in the municipal locals. That is on the way from actually like 7 years. So bookstores can apply for preferential rates that are like 1/3 of the normal rate, normal market rate in the center. So some of the booksellers profited from that, even if there are not so many municipal locals in the city, as we know. But this is I think the tool that can work. Also, of course, we work with booksellers in many different ways. For example, during the biggest festivals, we invite writers to the bookstores, not only to have this big meeting in the front of the big audience, but also to have rather calm atmosphere to interfere with readers. To give you an example, 2 years ago, it was the time when Swietłana Aleksiewicz came to Krakow, the Nobel Prize winner from 2015. We didn't know before we invited her to the Joseph Conrad Festival that she will have this Nobel Prize. So of course there was a huge mess about finding a bigger venue and other problems. But before it happened, we had already set up the meeting in the bookstore, in the little local bookstore in Krakow. And she came and she talked about the literature. We didn't promote it because it didn't make sense, of course. There were so many people there listening to her. That's the way how to attract people to the bookstore, to think about the bookstore as some kind of cultural institution. The other example, to give you 2 or 3, is our program to support emerging writers. So from the time of 2015, we established an award for writers who published already one book, but are in the front of publishing another. And this is a very serious time in the life of every writer, because after the success or lack of success, sometimes it's very hard to deal with publishers who have this risk about publishing writers who have not this established position on the market, that are not so well known already. And we observed this situation that from year to year, the same names, the same writers published, but these new, we didn't see them 3 years ago. And from the time when the Joseph Conrad Award was established, you were in the Capitol House.
The jury.
It's a jury, yeah, of this award. We saw the huge progress. For example, to give you one example, Bronka Nowicka won the Nike Prize last year after the splendid participation here. And for example, I don't know the other most prestigious award in Krakow, in Poland, the Passport of Polityka was also awarded to a debut writer. So I don't say that it's about it's thanks to the Joseph Conrad Award, but it's that something changed, that that this discourse appeared, that these writers appeared, and there are many of them, and they are much more well presented than, let's say, 3 years ago. So this is this program for debut writers. And give you last an example. From 2 years, we organized also a little book fair for antiquarians in Krakow, as we see that these people tend to have locals in very, very remote areas, and not everybody knows about the place where they have splendid offer of books. So we gather them together in the very, very beautiful square of St. Madeline's 4 times in a year, and just allow them to sell their books almost for free. And it's huge success, because we observe that people who just accidentally pass this square, and this is very tourist area, so many people coming around, when they are confronted with the literature that is on the street, that is close to them, they interested. They became interested in literature. So that's how it works. Of course, this program is not only about the branch, it's also about readers, about the authors. We try to think multilateral in different ways, and there are many, many new ideas to appear on behalf of this title, but I think it was just a little short introduction to how the City of UNESCO of Literature Krakow program works.
Right, thank you. We should move to the discussion now. On the screen over there you can see the results of a questionnaire conducted by Biuro Literackie among almost 40 European institutions. So this is a very good context for our discussion. And actually my first question would be about preserving the quality of the word, of literature, during the whole application process. Because in literary language, unlike in other areas that are financed in culture, in literary language we use words. We try to use them in best meanings, we try to use them in most precise way, we try to avoid banality, patterns, we try to see them in as subtle way as possible. And in the whole application process, in my experience also, you've got to be really careful with using words, you've got to be precise, and you've got to, sometimes you put, for example, political correctness above precision or vitality of the language. Sometimes you have to use patterns. So my question would be how we could improve the whole process of applying for money by the literary institutions, literary projects, in order to protect this subtle power of literature. Bosch Foundation has a very innovative application process. Applicants don't have to know their budget and their schedule at first. They just have to describe their projects, and then you contact them when necessary. Does this improve the whole application process? Does this improve the quality of the projects?
We don't like to say no, so it's the best to talk about the idea before you fill in the form. And the form has about 10 pages, so you can spare the time and the power. But I have to say we only invest about 10% of our money in projects of third parties. Normally we develop the idea together, so there's not really this problem you describe, I think. And also seldom writers are really the applicants. Normally they build a tandem, you may say, with a cultural manager who is used to fill in forms and build budgets and collect receipts and so on, what is necessary. Yeah.
And Ryan, as far as I know, in Highlight Arts, you also try to, the organization has its own prerogatives, but you let the artists pursue them in their own way. This is important for you.
I think, well, we're made up of members. There's 4 or 5 of us who are freelance, we're not paid, we're volunteers, and we get paid based on the project that we do, and we're all artists. So I really like that question, because I hate when I start drifting into grant speak, that way.
You're yourself, right?
Yeah, and I can't stand it. And then when you try to predict the outcome of an artistic project, I find that's very limiting and stifling. So we, as artists, try to preserve a space for the artists we're working with to experiment, to express themselves freely, and we try to keep all of those kind of ugly, weird, bureaucratic, grant talky things away from the people we're working with as much as possible, because I think we all hate it. But we recognize that we do have to go through that process occasionally in order to get the money from the bean counters, and to that end, it's almost 2 sides of our brains. My brain is split in half between grant speak and the way I talk about it internally to myself and to other artists.
Yeah, the thing is, you use same tool for the 2 things. This is your word, right? You use your words in order to apply for money. You use words in order to describe your most original ideas.
Yeah, and I find it very painful, and I try to really make sure I don't talk to artists like that, because I don't think it's helpful. I try to only talk to the British Council with that kind of language, and the Arts Council, and the people who really want kind of prescriptive, clear things. And it really rankles me. Thankfully, we've been very lucky, and we've been able to hire an administrator. So kind of like what you're saying, I think, who deals with a lot more of that stuff now. So I don't have to dirty my hands with it.
Right, and Biagio, at Zapis Fest you also try to protect the original spontaneity of literary art. How do you do that?
Well, basically, our festival is based on some money that arrives from the book fair, and not more else. Just sponsorships that come from personal, direct relationships between the manager of the House of Edition and people of the city of Messina, or the people from Catania. So we try to apply regional. We look for money from the regional government, and that stuff is very bureaucratical and works very badly, I must say, because it depends on political stuff and friendships, and we tend to leave this absolutely, because it gives us a lot of problems. A couple of years ago we presented the project, for example, I tell her this morning, and the people of the Assessorato in Palermo say it's a very good project, you have a lot of you're the best project, blah blah blah. We realized the festival with the idea that we had this money, and then they change the director, the political staff, and then they lose the money. They don't assign the money just because of they do other stuff, I don't know. So it's very problematic, the relationship with the political part, even if the thematic of our festival is really up to date, but it's like that, So we try to work with friends, and I'm here also because I think that we have much more try to create relationship also from the economical part with people of other parts of the world, because we did a lot with activists, with poets, with intellectuals, but we don't really look for the money part with other countries. So this maybe could be a good idea.
Krzysztof, the UNESCO City of Literature title is a kind of obligation for politicians to. How does it work with applying for money? Does it help? And you've got also residency program for the authors. How in the whole process you could protect and how could you preserve the nature of literature, which is quite subtle and.
It is an ongoing process. At the very beginning, the application for the UNESCO title was prepared by the group of passionates from the different experts from the different branches. It took years for the city to see it and to evaluate it in the good way, and for the city to see that this could be very profitable. I don't mean economically, but symbolically for the city. So we see the huge change in these years, and also I would like to underline the very important thing that this collaboration actually, that every hour of our project it's divided. It's not that we invent something for someone else, even if this one doesn't want it. It's that we collaborate together. We are this, of course, more formal part. We make this happen, but at the very beginning we try to see something valuable and to talk and to think how could it happen. This way, for example, Konrad Festival works. Right? There are two organizers: the Krakow Festival Office and Tygodnik Powszechny Foundation. So what can link each other? Only a love and passion for books, of course. And then on the other side, on the other step is I talk about the money, of course. And this idea to work together with different institutions also can help, because it can help diverse our financial ship. For example, this festival, Joseph Konrad Festival, is financed by the city from the one part, and this is this part of the Krakow Festival Office. But Tygodnik Powszechny has their grants from the Ministry of Culture, so it can link, right? And it can link on the other ways, for example, on some formal ways. For example, for us, to speak about the law, you have a lot of limitations how to conduct cultural activity as a public institution in Poland, because there is a very strict law for everything. You have to have a competition when there are different parts, and you have to choose one. It's very complicated. It takes a lot of time. So these things that are combined with, for example, taking care about the hotel, it's a part of the other side of the process. Other organizer who is a foundation who has a lot more potential and has a lot more opportunities to do this. So this is one example.
All right, thank you. And my second question would be, of course, connected with the first one, but it's about another specific problem connected with financing literature. The writer usually doesn't need any technical devices. He doesn't go for research to another country. He doesn't work with other writers. Very often he just sits at his desk or her desk and writes. So the most important thing for the writer is time. And what are the best forms of support the writers in this context? How to improve the whole process for the writer to get his time. Maya's, the Bosch Foundation is awarding Adelbert von Camisso Prize to the writers. How does it work?
Yeah, Actually, we have finished this prize.
Sorry.
It was for authors with another cultural background, writing in the German language, and we are not really convinced of prizes, because prizes just go to one person in a year or every 2 years, and mostly 10 or 20% of the money is going to the author and 80% to the jury and the reception and PR and so on.
What about scholarships?
Yes, scholarships is a better tool to support the authors. But what I would like to say is, maybe you are not expecting that literature needs subvention like all the arts and education. So that's the base, and it's important to read the books, to buy the books, and to recommend the books. But the most important form of support, I think, is advocacy for literature. It's important to safeguard and fight for the space where literature takes place and where literature people can meet each other and share experience, like the festival here. And I observe with concern the shrinking spaces for civil society in Poland, for example. I see it's not getting easier to have these places. So everybody should advocate for literature on his, her job and in the public.
Okay, but first we also need writers to get some time for writing, I guess.
Yeah, it's
Ryan, how does
it's
it work?
different for us because obviously we're usually working. We'll meet, a week or two before a festival, and usually about 10 days before a festival, and we'll sit people in a room, and they've got a deadline. We've got to perform new work, new translations by the end of that week. So we try to give as much time as we can, but time is money. Every day, 8 people in a hotel or in one place, that's $1,000. So we try to give as much time as we can to be as generous with that time as humanly possible. But they're kind of under, they're fighting the clock, and it can be stressful. I'm stressed out at the beginning of it, and about 3 days in, I realize, oh no, it's going to be okay. And we also try to be like, hey, if you don't like what you've done, you don't have to read, you won't have to read everything. You have 5 to 7 days to work together, but you only have to present for an hour. So there's usually a little wiggle room if a poem isn't working. So that's the kind of way we give time. Obviously, we pay everybody who's involved a reasonable sum so that they can then pay, time is money. And I think one of the other resources that as you were talking, that reminded me we're very conscious of, when you go to, when you're working with people, when you're trying to choose 8 people to participate in a project, say to go to Iraq, on both sides we're looking for a mixture of young and new talent and older established talent. And that's really important because on both sides, the UK side and say the Iraqi side, those relationships are very beneficial. Those are networks and educational for the younger poets. And it's also interesting to watch the older poets become kind of mentors to the younger generation as well, because it's a very, you're living together for 10 days. And we also try very hard not to go with the obvious choices of established poets, not the really, really big famous names every country. If you say you're going to work in Iraq, people usually are like, oh, you must work with Sada Youssef or Gulula Nouri or Chomin Hardy or something like that. And we try to be like, well, those people already have a presence in the United Kingdom or a presence in English-speaking countries. So we try to find people and give them an opportunity that they might not otherwise have had to access an audience. So that's where we're trying to support writers. Unfortunately, we can't just give them 2 months to do the work that they need to do. That part we are constrained by the fact that we're usually gearing up to present somewhere. There is a deadline.
Biagio, you're a poet too. What kind of support would you appreciate the most for you?
Well, what we are working on is, on one side, there is a collaboration with the university, with some friends, professors that maybe invite writers for a scholarship, for meeting in a university. On the other side, we try to hospit them for a period of residence and create an also occasion meeting with the writers from Sicily. So this is a part of the work. And on the other side, we are trying to make more stable the idea of having residence. And we have the project this year to start with an apartment in a small village in the north, in the mountains, in the north part of Sicily, with the idea of having there just a place for artists to stay in a very quiet and nice place. So, you want to go? Yes, one of the things that we have in Sicily is that people tendency like to come to Sicily, so we have this opportunity. Okay.
People tend to like to come to Krakow too. What about Krakow, a residency program for the writers?
Sure. There's sometimes they like, sometimes they have, because there is this residential programs for persecuted writers, ICORN. Krakow is in this network from 2011, and the idea how it was formulated between the others by Salman Rushdie is to give a shelter for those who publish, those who write, but they cannot in their countries because of some persecutions going on. And from that time, Krakow hosted seven authors. Right now we have a Libyan writer. For example, it was Lawan Barszczewski from Belarus, who was translating many works from Polish to Belarusian during his period. There was an activist and a journalist from Turkey, Asli Erdogan, who was famous later because he was arrested during these persecutions after the failed coup d'etat, right? Krakow is, of course, not the only Polish city that is in this network. In recent time, Wrocław joined, and very, very most recently, Gdańsk and Katowice applied for this program. So we try to also collaborate with the cities of ICORN in this area. We had a grant for anchoring ICORN program that will help to collaborate with the cities with ICORN titles from the Baltic area origin. So we'll share practices, we'll meet each other, we will discuss the freedom of a word. So I think this program is very valuable for the city.
My third question would be about the level of risk, the correct level of risk when financing literary projects, because the application process usually takes into account already existing forms of literary activities, although the word innovation, of course, is very commonly used. The question would be how to preserve real innovation, how to avoid self-censorship by the applicants, and how to avoid risk aversion. What is the most important is to let young people and debutants, as you said, to do their projects in their own way. But sometimes it's really risky to finance some kind of activities. If you want to finance debuts and people who are starting their careers, you have to risk. So the question would be how to do that, how to improve this process. And Maya, the Bosch Foundation, has a program for literary translators, and you try to work with young people, with beginners who are starting making a start in their careers. How do you deal with the risk? How do you improve the application process itself?
There are different kinds of risk. The one we are not really talking about is the question of personal security, but it's getting more and more important for us. We had to call back our scholarship holders from Turkey, for example, in August. You are more talking about the risk of failure. So that's our daily business, and it's normal that things are changing, that you have surprises and shifts and changes in the budget and with the names. It's the same today and here. With the newcomers, we often have mentoring as a way to minimize the risk. They can work together with an experienced one. For example, the translators. We have the Hieronymus program, especially for the newcomers among the literary translators.
Okay, and Ryan, you also at Highlight Arts, you also try to work with young artists who are not yet well known.
Yeah, I guess like you said, I mean, we're hedging our bets by having people who are really established and people who aren't so established, who have never done that kind of work before. So you're really balancing it out, and you're kind of making sure that there's enough people. Also, you know, we're picking people that I've worked with, or I know, or I've seen their work, and I'm usually relatively confident at this stage that we can pull stuff off. I mean, the biggest crisis we ever had as an organization was taking an entire 4-day multi-arts festival, film, literature, translation workshop, visual arts, music, from Damascus and transplanting it into Beirut in a matter of 4 days. And that was hard. Anybody who's organized a festival probably could imagine trying to find a dozen new venues and new hotels for people to stay at and new workshop spaces and all of this stuff in a matter of days. But a lot of us had grown up out of running an arts collective called The Forest in Edinburgh, which was a very chaotic volunteer-run, collectively owned space, and we have a stomach and an appetite for chaos as organizers. And we know, and we've done it for a decade, and we knew how to. We know how to handle that. We don't freak out too much, even though we should be really freaking out a lot, if that makes sense. So we were able to really quickly kind of. We can problem solve really quickly, and I think that's just experience. We're just lucky that we have a lot of people involved in our group who are very experienced, not just as artists, but also as organizers as well.
I'm asking about that because very often on festivals and in the financing institutions, it's very common that they support people, writers and activities that are already well known and well established. In your institutions, all of them, you try to support people who are beginners, but the risk might be really, really hard. What about you, Biagio?
Yes, as the others say, we try to mix. And also to create occasional meeting. For example, we have many good young translators that come as volunteers in our festival. And sometime, like last year, there was this young good translator from Arabic. She followed a very good Arabic poet, and then he proposed her to translate in Italian his new book. So maybe this is also an opportunity, not only in the case of editor, also in the case of translator, to create this kind of a connection.
Krzysztof, how do you work with young artists in Krakow? How do you try to support them?
There is a creative writing program for emerging talents, but not only for those who already published something, like the Content Award, but for anyone. And there are different ways in which we work with the people. There is this course that lasts 5 months, and it's very dense. It's like 10 meetings, weekend meetings, packed with events, meetings with authors who talk about their work, but not only authors, about with the editors too, with the publishers, with even psychologists. We have a series of meetings with redactors, editors of the publishing houses, in which they are very, very successful actually, because people can see what are the expectations of the big publishing houses on the other hand, and on the other hand these editors can see what people tend to write, how they think. So our idea is to meet these groups together and work. The other way how to promote emerging writers is to invite them simply, and to invite to collaborate also with the publishers who are not mainstream publishers. For example, on Conrad Festival each year there are authors that are from, for example, that are published by little publishing houses like Charakter, Krakow, very, very good publishing house. Or we collaborate strictly with Książkowe Klimaty. This year we'll have 2 Iranian writers on the festival, and our idea is not to promote only those blockbusters, because we'll have Dan Brown, for example, but also to underline the topic. This is the most important. When the meeting itself, it's about the topic. When it's doesn't about the writer, about his fame, about. When the topic is interesting, then everyone will come. For example, there will be a meeting with Nilüfer Güler, a Turkish writer, sociologist on the Conrad Festival, author of a book translated in Character Publishing House, about migrations in Europe, about the contemporary Muslim communities in Europe, and how to deal with this challenge. It's not about the writer, it's about the things that are common, the problems that are common.
All right, are there any questions now? I hope everybody already has many questions.
I have a question. Actually, how did you start? Because now I live in a rather small community, and I really would like to animate it, and I see the potential. But I see that the mentality is rather stuck, and people are really, they get used to what they already have, and that's why I'm curious. How did you start, and what were your inspirations? And I already have some inspirations after this talk, so maybe I will use it, but I'm waiting for an answer for you. Thank you.
If I can tell, for us it's very important to work with school. Also with little kids, so starting from the very young people, which is a way to enter in relationship with a community, or we have this situation also in Catania. We have a very, very popular part of the city, like in every city, So how do you enter in a relationship with people that maybe don't read books or things like that? You start from the school, from the kids, it's the base of the job, and then this can create a relationship in the time. Often it's also another way about what you asked before, to help young writers, in the meaning that we involve often people that live in Catania or live in Messina. It's not easy to have people that came from abroad to work for months in a project in a school. So this is also an opportunity for them to have a space, a job. Okay.
I would suggest build a heterogeneous group of activists, not only of literary people, and look for other people from the municipality or entrepreneurs or publishing houses. You should build an alliance, a network to go on. And I think it could be helpful to use public spaces and to get visible with what you are doing.
Ryan, what about your advice?
Yeah, I guess we started out very grassroots, I guess, with a small film festival. So, and then that kind of grew. Like usually, I find that if you start with a small idea, people's natural inclinations is to explore and explode it, and it gets out of hand very quickly. So if you start with a big idea first, you're gonna have too much to do. So, and I think, like you said, passionate people who are interested in the subject, interested in what you're doing. We all worked for free at the very beginning, so really a labor of love and interest. And yeah, worked with just friends. We did something that was fun for us, and I think that to me is always the best way to. That's how we start things, just by diving in, quite stupidly and possibly ignorantly.
Krzysztof, any advice?
I'll try to research what will interest people. To give you an example that came to my mind, there was this Miasto Archipelag project by Filip Springer, who was visiting the Polish journalist and reporter who visited the former voivodeship capitals in Poland. There are many cities like that. During communist time, there were 48 cities that had the same level, right, of administration. Some of them were very, very little, and because of this state, they became larger. For example, like there is a little town called Skierniewice in Poland, where half of the city is constructed during communist time. It's like big, huge, flat area. It could not happen if Skierniewice was not voivodeship capital. And he traveled to all these cities and asked people how they live right now, what they think about this status of provisionalism right now. And he saw huge interest in this. Actually, people started as he was describing on the meetings. He was met with a big, warm, opened attitude from the people who started to interest more in the history of their cities because of this work only. So that's my advice.
All right, I'm afraid our time is up already. Thank you very much. This question about how to begin was a perfect finish for our discussion. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you.